Let me ask you something before we begin. Think about the last time you changed your mind. Maybe you shifted your opinion after a conversation. Maybe you ordered something at a restaurant because everyone else at the table seemed excited about it. Maybe you stayed quiet in a meeting, even though you had something worth saying, because the room felt like it had already decided. Now, ask yourself, was that really your choice? That question isn't meant to unsettle you. It's meant to open something. Because the honest truth is, most of us have never been taught to distinguish between a thought we arrived at through reflection and one that was quietly handed to us by the group around us. We like to believe we are the authors of our own minds. We imagine our opinions as things we built, carefully, piece by piece, from evidence and experience. But social psychology tells a different story, and it tells it gently, without accusation. It says, you are a social animal, shaped by forces so familiar they feel like your own skin. This volume is about those forces, about the invisible architecture of group influence, how it forms, how it operates, and how you can begin to recognize it moving through your life.
Picture a school cafeteria. A researcher places one student, a regular kid, no special status, at a table that everyone in the school has quietly agreed is uncool. Within 3 days, that student's former friends begin sitting elsewhere. No one says anything out loud, no rule is announced. The social pressure operates in complete silence, communicated through glances, hesitations, and the quiet geometry of where people choose to plant their lunch trays. The student hasn't changed, only the label has, and the group enforces it without a single spoken word. That vignette isn't about cruelty, it's about mechanism. Social influence doesn't require malice. It doesn't need a ringleader. It emerges from the collective desire for belonging, and belonging, for most of human history, meant survival. Your nervous system does not yet know the difference between social rejection and physical danger. When the group turns away, something ancient in you sounds an alarm. That alarm is worth understanding, because once you understand it, it loses some of its power over you. We tend to think of conformity as weakness, something lesser people do. But conformity is not a character flaw. It is a deeply human feature, one that helped groups coordinate, cooperate, and survive for thousands of years. The problem isn't that we feel social pressure. The problem is when we never notice it happening. Psychologist Solomon Asch conducted a series of now famous experiments in the 1950s where participants were asked to match the length of a line on a card to one of 3 comparison lines. The answer was obvious, objectively, unmistakably obvious. And yet, when surrounded by actors who confidently gave the wrong answer, 75% of real participants conformed to the incorrect answer at least once, while the overall rate of incorrect answers across all critical trials was approximately 37%. Read that again slowly. The answer was obvious. And still, 3 out of 4 people doubted what their own eyes were telling them at least once because the group said so. In the control condition, where no actors were present, the error rate was less than 1%. This is not a story about stupidity. It is a story about the weight of the social world on individual perception. We don't just behave in groups. We see differently in groups. We think differently. The group becomes a lens, and most of us don't know we're wearing it. Now, layer on top of that what psychologists call social proof, the cognitive shortcut where we use other people's behavior as evidence of what is correct. When you walk into a restaurant and it's empty, something in you hesitates. When you see a crowd outside a door, something in you leans forward. Neither reaction is a reasoned response. Both are social calibrations happening beneath your conscious awareness.
Robert Cialdini, in his foundational work on influence, described social proof as one of the primary levers of human persuasion. People follow the lead of similar others. That quote is 8 words. Its implications take a lifetime to fully absorb. Because similar others means the people closest to you, your family, your community, your circle, are among the most powerful shapers of what you believe is possible, acceptable, or true. This doesn't mean those people are wrong. It means their influence is significant and largely unexamined. In the next section, we go deeper. We'll look at how conformity operates in modern life, not in laboratories, but in workplaces, friendships, and the daily stream of choices you make about who you want to be. Conformity is not always loud. Sometimes it sounds like agreement. Sometimes it sounds like nothing at all. The most common form of conformity in adult life isn't someone pressuring you into something dramatic. It's the meeting where you know the plan won't work and you say nothing. It's the friendship group where one person's politics slowly becomes everyone's politics, not through argument, but through exposure and repetition. It's the way you describe yourself using words that others gave you, words that fit their categories more than your actual experience.
Psychologists distinguish between 2 kinds of conformity. The first is compliance, changing your behavior while privately disagreeing. You act along, but your inner reading remains different. The second is internalization, actually absorbing the group's views as your own. Internalization is the more significant one, because once a belief is internalized, it doesn't feel external anymore. It feels like you. This is where the question from the opening becomes important. Not just, did you change your mind, but at what depth did the change occur? Was it compliance, a surface adaptation that left your inner compass intact? Or was it internalization, a genuine rewriting of what you believe? Neither is inherently wrong. Internalization is how we learn. It's how culture transmits wisdom across generations. But it is worth examining what you have internalized and from whom. A young woman joins a competitive consulting firm at 26. In her first year, she notices that the senior partners regularly speak over junior staff in meetings. No one complains. The junior staff even defend the behavior. That's just how it works here, they say. By year 3, she finds herself doing the same thing to newer employees. She doesn't notice it happening. It feels natural, efficient even. One day, a colleague from outside the firm sits in on a meeting and quietly says, "Do you realize no one under 30 got to finish a sentence today?" She is not a bad person. She is a person who absorbed a norm so completely it became invisible to her. That is internalization in action. Here is the reflection question. What behavior in your current environment have you stopped noticing because everyone around you does it? Sit with that. There's no wrong answer. The point is simply to look. This week, pick one recurring group situation. A team meeting, a family dinner, a social gathering. Before it begins, set one private intention. I will notice at least once a moment where I agree or stay silent, not because I genuinely agree, but because it feels easier. You don't need to say anything out loud. Just notice. Noticing is the first act of self-authorship. The herd moves, and it moves fast. Herd mentality, sometimes called mob psychology or clinically de-individuation, describes what happens to individual judgment when it dissolves into collective momentum. People in crowds behave in ways that individuals rarely would alone, not just in riots or panics, though those are the dramatic examples. In everyday life, herd dynamics operate in financial markets, in social media trending, in the way a neighborhood's character can shift within a single decade as people follow each other's choices without ever consulting a map. Gustave Le Bon wrote in the late 19th century that under certain conditions, the sentiments and ideas of all persons in a gathering take one and the same direction. Conscious personality vanishes and a collective mind is formed, doubtless transitory, but presenting very clearly defined characteristics.
His language was occasionally dramatic, but the core observation held. When we join a group in motion, something about our individual critical faculties softens. This softening is not stupidity. It is in part cognitive load management. We cannot independently verify every piece of information we encounter. Following the crowd is often a functional shortcut. If thousands of people are running in one direction, stopping to verify whether there is actually danger behind you is biologically costly. The herd shortcut evolved for moments exactly like that. But we now live in an environment where that shortcut is frequently exploited. Digital platforms, by design, show you what is trending, what the herd is already consuming, reacting to, believing. The architecture of social media is, in many ways, a conformity machine. Not maliciously, but structurally, the mechanism rewards the signal that already has momentum. The question is not whether you use these platforms. The question is whether you recognize the herd dynamic operating inside them, and whether that recognition changes how much authority you grant to what is popular. On May 6, 2010, the U.S. stock market experienced what became known as the flash crash. Beginning at 2:32 in the afternoon, the Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged nearly 1,000 points, dropping roughly 600 of those points in just 5 minutes before recovering most of its losses within the same hour. The total market value temporarily erased exceeded $1 trillion. Investigators found that automated trading systems had begun reacting to each other's sell orders in a cascading loop. High-frequency trading firms rapidly bought and resold contracts among themselves in what regulators later compared to a game of hot potato, each system responding to the other's movement rather than to any underlying economic reality. The market recovered by the close of trading, ending down only about 3% from the previous day, but the event exposed something. Even in highly sophisticated environments, the herd instinct, the impulse to move because movement is happening, can override reasoned judgment at extraordinary speed. Human traders watched their screens in disbelief. No one knew what was happening. The mechanism wasn't news, it was momentum feeding on itself. Now consider, where in your life does your thinking move, not because you've evaluated something, but because momentum has? The next time you feel a strong impulse to agree with, share, or adopt a popular opinion, online or in person, pause for exactly 10 seconds before acting. In those 10 seconds, ask, do I actually believe this, or am I riding the momentum of the group? You don't need to resist. You just need to insert a moment of authorship between the impulse and the action. We return now to social proof, but this time we go underneath its surface. Social proof is ubiquitous. When a product has 10,000 reviews, you trust it more than a product with 10. When your peers are buying houses in a certain neighborhood, you start wondering whether you should be too. When everyone at the party seems to know something you don't, you assume the deficit is yours. What makes social proof particularly worth examining is its relationship to identity. We don't only use the group's behavior to determine what is safe or correct. We use it to determine who we are.
Social identity theory, first formally proposed by Henri Tajfel and John Turner in 1979 and further developed through the 1980s, argues that a significant portion of our self-concept is derived from the groups we belong to. We don't just join groups for convenience, we become them in some partial and important way. This means that when the group shifts, when its norms, opinions, or behaviors change, we face a subtle internal threat. Disagreeing with the group can feel like disagreeing with yourself, and that, psychologically, is a much harder thing to do. This is why cult dynamics are so difficult to exit, why political polarization is so resistant to evidence, and why it can feel genuinely disorienting to change your mind about something your entire social circle believes. The belief isn't just a belief, it's load-bearing. It's holding up part of the architecture of who you understand yourself to be. Understanding this doesn't mean you should distrust your groups or abandon your communities. It means you can hold your group memberships with a slightly looser grip, appreciating what they offer without outsourcing your thinking entirely to their consensus.
A man in his 40s has been voting the same political party his entire adult life, not because he has carefully reviewed each policy cycle, but because that is what his family does, what his town does. One evening, his teenage daughter asks him to explain why he supports a specific policy. He opens his mouth to answer and realizes, for the first time, that he doesn't have the words. The belief has been there, solid, present, without ever being examined. He is not ashamed. He is, for a moment, simply surprised. That surprise is the beginning of something valuable. What belief do you hold most confidently? And could you explain it to a thoughtful skeptic without borrowing your group's language?
Norms are the invisible rulebook. Every group has them. Most are never written down. Most are never discussed. They are transmitted through tone, reaction, and repetition until they feel not like rules, but like reality. Peer influence is the mechanism by which norms travel. It doesn't require explicit pressure. Mostly, it operates through modeling. We observe, we adjust, we approximate. We calibrate ourselves to the people around us the way a compass needle calibrates to north, automatically, continuously, without deliberate effort. Research consistently shows that peer influence peaks in early to mid-adolescence, with friends' similarity on self-reported behaviors reaching its apex during those years, but does not vanish in adulthood. A University of Texas at Dallas study published in Psychology and Aging found that susceptibility to social conformity pressure continues into early adulthood, and traces of it persist even in middle age, particularly around everyday self-control decisions. Adults are influenced by peers in spending decisions, health behaviors, professional risk tolerance, and life satisfaction. The content of peer influence shifts as we age. The mechanism does not disappear. What changes in adulthood, or what can change, is our awareness of it. A teenager typically cannot observe peer influence operating on themselves in real time. A reflective adult can develop that capacity. It is a skill. It can be built.
The environment you inhabit is not neutral. It is actively shaping you. The people you spend the most time with are not just companions. They are, in a very real sense, contributors to who you are becoming. That's not a reason to audit your relationships coldly. It's a reason to be intentional about what environments you choose to stay in and which ones you quietly let go. We have walked now through 4 dimensions of social influence: conformity, herd mentality, social proof, and peer influence. What runs through all of them is a single thread: the human need to belong, to be understood, to fit within the contours of a world that makes sense. That need is not your weakness, it is your humanity. The work is not to eliminate it, the work is to see it clearly. Now we make it personal. Understanding social conditioning is useful only if it changes something, not in an abstract, intellectual way, but in the texture of your daily experience. So let's take what we've covered and bring it into your actual life. You have, by now, met conformity up close.
You've seen how internalized norms can become invisible. You've looked at how herd momentum can carry thinking without evidence, how social proof borrows authority from the crowd, and how peer environments shape identity in ways that rarely announce themselves.
Here is the micro exercise for this volume. 3-step audit. The borrowed belief inventory. Step 1. Choose one belief, opinion, or behavior pattern you hold with high confidence. Something you would describe as simply who you are. Write it down in a single sentence. Step 2. Trace it backward. Where did this belief come from? A parent? A mentor? A peer group? A formative experience? Be honest. If you can't trace it, that's useful information too. Step 3. Now ask, if the people who gave me this belief had believed the opposite, would I still hold it? You don't need to abandon the belief if your answer is no, but let the question do its work. A belief that survives scrutiny is stronger for it. A belief that dissolves under examination was never really yours. This exercise isn't about skepticism for its own sake. It isn't about becoming untethered from community or tradition. It's about the difference between inheriting a belief and choosing it. Even if you choose the same thing you inherited, the choosing matters. It is the act of choosing that makes it yours.
There is also something important to say about the emotional experience of this kind of examination. It can be uncomfortable. When you begin to see the social architecture around your own thinking, it can produce a mild vertigo, a sense of groundlessness. That feeling is not a warning sign. It is a sign that something real is happening. Groundlessness in this context is the precondition for standing on something solid. Many people stop at discomfort. They feel the edge of their conditioning and step back. That is understandable. But you don't need to sprint past the edge. You can move slowly, one small observation at a time, one question asked gently. The work of self-awareness is not surgery, it's archaeology, patient, layer by layer, with interest rather than urgency. I choose what I carry forward. Say those words when the social pressure is loudest, not as armor, but as an anchor, a reminder that even in the pull of the group, there is a self that is doing the choosing. We have covered a great deal of ground today, but I want to leave you not with a summary, but with a feeling. The social world is not your enemy. The people who influenced you, your family, your peers, the communities that shaped you, were not performing acts of manipulation. They were passing on what they knew. They were doing what humans have always done, transmitting the accumulated norms of the group to help the next generation belong. The problem was never the transmission. The problem is forgetting that it happened. When you forget that your mind has been shaped, you mistake the contours of your conditioning for the edges of the possible. You confuse the group's ceiling for the sky, and that is a quiet tragedy. Not dramatic, not visible, but real. Because the version of you that might have thought differently, chosen differently, seen differently, simply never gets a chance to speak. This volume is an invitation to make space for that voice. Not the voice that rebels for its own sake, not the voice that distrusts everyone or everything, but the voice that is genuinely curious. The voice that asks without anxiety, what do I actually think? The voice that can sit in a group, belong to a group, love a group, and still hold something of its own. Social conditioning is not a conspiracy. It is not something being done to you by shadowy forces. It is the ordinary, constant, largely unconscious work of culture. And culture is built by people, imperfect people, well-meaning, limited people, who were themselves shaped by the culture before them. Understanding this produces something important: compassion for the people who handed you your norms, for yourself for having absorbed them unquestioningly,
for the difficulty of the work ahead, which is not the work of becoming someone new, but of becoming more fully yourself. Go gently. Go curiously. Go with the understanding that every moment of genuine self-awareness is a small act of liberation, not from the group, but from the unconscious grip of it. And the next time a room goes quiet and everyone is nodding, notice what is happening in your chest. Notice what you almost said. Notice the space between the social pull and your own still forming thought. That space, small, quiet, briefly yours, is where everything begins.